Hey there, good afternoon, Indiana. Welcome to a special presentation on the Progressive Indiana Network. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I am here this afternoon with Devon Wellington from MADVoters. And so for the next 10 weeks, MADVoters and Progressive Indiana Network are going to partner on a weekly show where we recap the developments in the Statehouse over the course of that week while the legislature is in session. Now, we're just beginning this week, so things are kind of just beginning to move. As such, there's not a lot of developments in terms of like this passed or that did not pass. So we're going to begin with a bit of a preview, as it were, of the bills in a certain genre. And today we are talking about education-related matters. Obviously, this is one of the major areas that is left to the states to regulate, as opposed to the federal government, and so that is a major area of discussion for legislation. One of the big things that our legislators tackle every year in the session. And so, Devon, I've got you here with me because you are a bit of the education policy expert in a way with MADVoters. Is that accurate?
In a way, we have a great team of, sort of lots of people in different roles as teachers, people who have been in administration. So everyone sort of is able to lend their voice. But yeah, my background's in education policy.
Very good. And I'm so glad to have you here. I'm glad we get a chance to do this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Education, obviously, so important. The foundation of a healthy democracy. And boy, our democracy is very sick right now. So it is very important to bolster our educational foundation. And in this state, certainly where we're lagging behind, our outcomes have not been great. They've only been getting worse with the 20 years of Republican supermajority rule. And if you look nationwide at the way Linda McMahon is dismantling the U.S. Department of Education, it's concerning, to say the least.
Yeah, heartbreaking. Yeah.
So I guess before we really get into this, can you tell us a little bit about MADVoters and what it is you guys do there?
Yeah. MADVoters is a great, it's very person-powered organization, and it's a nonprofit, and it focuses on empowering civic engagement, getting people involved and getting people behind progressive policies in a grassroots way, but organizing us so that the coalition can actually get work done. I think a lot of times people feel like we're screaming into a void, and MADVoters really allows anyone who wants to get involved an avenue to do so. And so we work, to help progressive policies move forward either at a state level, through education, through outreach, through advocacy, but it's really locally powered, volunteer powered. There's no national organization. We're not a partisan organization. We just really want to make sure that anyone who wants to get involved in the legislative process can do so in a way that's productive.
And I should note that MADVoters is not a partisan organization. You are
correct.
Not affiliated with either major political party.
Yes, we are nonpartisan. We like to say nonpartisan, but not neutral.
Yeah, that is a very good way to put it, I would say. And then you guys have a tremendous service at the website at madvoters.org, your bill tracker, which
it's unbelievable. Yes.
Is unbelievable. Every single piece of legislation being debated at the Statehouse this year, this session, is up there with a preview. And you track it as it goes through the various committees, as it goes through its first reading, second reading, and switches from the House to the Senate or vice versa. Actually, can you tell us a little bit about the process? Give me the the old schoolhouse rock, how a bill becomes a law. That it's
sure.
Probably a little bit before your time, but
I remember it.
What's the Indiana version of that?
I'm just a bill. Yeah.
I'm just a bill.
Yeah, so there are four main stages that a bill goes through in the legislative process. And that's how the bill becomes a law, like Schoolhouse Rock taught us. And even though over 1,000 bills might be filed, only a fraction of it make it through all the steps to become a law. And that's a good thing, right? The step one is the committee. So the bills are assigned to a committee where the legislators are able to debate them, discuss them, vote on them. And that's when public can come and offer testimony on the bills. And that's something that MADVoters also does. Not all bills will receive a committee hearing. And so if someone wants to propose a bill, but it doesn't even get a committee hearing, then it's considered dead and it's ineligible to move forward. The second step of that would be...
Can I ask about that really quick?
Sure.
Why would a bill not get a committee hearing? Is this like kind of pet project things that a lawmaker would introduce, like really extreme culture war slop or something, and even the other members of the same party on that committee are like, come on, get that out of here?
Like it's DOA. There's some bills that are exactly that, DOA. But the other reason why it might not even get to committee is because each committee has a chairperson, and that chairperson gets to decide which bills come to the floor.
Okay.
And so if that person has specific ideas or biases, that might also impact what bills even come forward.
Okay, very good. Thanks for clarifying that. So I guess from there, what's going to happen with a piece of legislation?
Sure. So then the chamber considers it. So bills that are passed by their committee then go to the full chamber. So if a bill is introduced in the House, the committee passes it, then it would go to the House, and then the same for the Senate. And that's the second reading of it. And that's when amendments are proposed as well. And amendments can be proposed in step one as well when it goes to the original committee. And then during the third reading is when the official vote is taken. So then if it passes in its chamber, then it will go to the other chamber, the opposite chamber, and then they go through committee again, the amending process again. And so only the bills that are passed by both chambers would actually be eligible to become a law. And oftentimes, if a bill is introduced in the House and it goes to the Senate, and then they have to go back to the House and decide if they like that version of it. So that's actually step 4 is, once it goes back to the original chamber, then they have to actually agree that's what they want or make the changes that the other chamber is asking of. And then once they do that, then it is sent to the governor to be signed into a law. And if they can't agree on the bill, both chambers, then a conference committee can be formed to adjust the bill until both sides can agree. But that's sort of the general process.
Okay, so it's got to go through the committee, then to the full chamber, and it has to be read in that chamber multiple times, and amendments can be made at each step of the way. And then when it passes through the chamber, it swaps, and so we're in a short session this year, really, so really the even numbered years are short sessions like this, and then the odd number years, those are budget sessions, and they pass a 2-year budget, right? And that's so that session lasts like through April, maybe April. In the beginning of May typically, but this year they're going to be done like by the end of March. Is that right?
Especially because of the redistricting, that wasn't a special session. It just started this legislative session early. So we lost some time in that way too.
Are you suggesting that President Trump's gerrymandering gambit has cost our state legislatures valuable time debating what could be bills that make our lives better?
That would be a fair statement to make, in my opinion, yes.
So let's, knowing that this is the process by which these bills move through the State House, let's tackle the education-related bills one by one. And I want to start with, I guess, are there some themes that we were looking at with these education bills before we dive into any specific one individually?
There's the themes, sort of what you brought up about like the culture war of it all. We are seeing that as a theme through some of the bills, trying to codify that into our state code. I mean, getting it on the books. And that is in terms of especially how religion plays its role in public education. And then the other really big theme right now is public education and having public dollars go to voucher and private private schools, charter schools, things like that.
So really, in a way, those are sort of both dealing with the privatization of
Correct.
this public good, our public education
Correct.
system, being it for private religious institutions taking state money or imposing their will on public education in a way,
Yes.
or also then you've got the private for-profit charter organizations also looting the public treasury.
Correct.
So
Correct. And a lot of the bills too have. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, big theme is that you've got lots of hands in the public pot of money trying to get their cut. Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of people who actually don't have a background in education trying to legislate education, which is always really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so let's, and as somebody who has studied education policy professionally, really done their work, done their research, that's got to really grind your gears.
It's very, very frustrating. Yeah, my background, like you said, is education policy, and I've done policy at the federal level and at the state and district level. I've seen how it works through sort of all the different stages and levels of our government, and it can be really frustrating, especially because we have this idea that states should have control of their state's education, right? They should have the power of education, but then when people don't like something, they blame the federal government, or at least they have in the past, about like, well, they're mandating, or they're saying they're handing this thing down that's too progressive or too liberal or whatever it is. And really, if you have a problem with your state's education, it's your state's deal. The money that comes from the federal government is really about ensuring that all kids get an education, poor kids, disabled kids, and that we have best practices in education, that we're tracking how our education is doing. The national report card and all of that is getting stripped away. So when people complain about education, like, you need to talk to your state and you need to talk to your district.
Well, and we can zoom out briefly and just look at the education outcomes in quote unquote blue states versus quote unquote red states, and you can judge from there.
And you can also look, zoom out and see that the impact of federal dollars go much farther, 2 to 3 times more impact per dollar. And I would wager that's because of the accountability measures that are required to use those dollars.
Yes. And this Department of Education under Linda McMahon, under the Trump regime, is sending more and more of the responsibility to the states, and maybe not necessarily sending the money to the states to figure out things on their own.
Correct. Yes. So they're saying, let's give the power back to the states. The states already had the power largely. The federal agencies' job was just to make sure they were actually doing what the law said they had to do, and giving them support to do what the law said they had to do. But then, I don't know how, and I haven't heard any concrete ideas or details about how the taxpayer dollar that was supporting the Department of Education will go back to the states. And if that is true, then red states are going to have a really hard time, because blue states like California pay a lot more money in federal taxes. So I don't know how they're going to reallocate that money back to the states. But if that's true, we're going to be in a world of hurt here in Indiana.
Well, and I don't know how this is going to fly in the courts, or if the courts are going to be able to enforce what they want to do. But you see the Trump administration threatening to cut off all money to a handful of blue states for childcare. Right? Is education next?
Yes.
And they use their financial leverage to exact a price from.
But it's taxpayer dollars.
Yes. And yeah, obviously we know where the taxpayer dollars are coming from and where they're going, and you can debate the fairness of that all day long.
Yes,
we won't do that here today.
Yeah, not today.
Let's dig in a bit to one of these folks who likes to legislate about education, doesn't necessarily know what they're doing. Michelle Davis in the House of Representatives has introduced House Bill 1086, and I'm going to pull up this lovely card from the Mad Voters Bill Tracker website, which shows, let's see, is that the one I want? No, that's
yes.
So this bill requires the display of the 10 Commandments in each classroom and the school library. Where to begin with that?
Christian nationalism, probably, but this bill itself has been introduced in several iterations before, and it has never passed. And a lot of times bills like this are used as a distraction for other bills, right? Like we've seen this with a lot of other types of issues in our state where the same hot topic or hot button issue, they try to legislate it, and this hasn't passed before, but it's used as sort of a distraction for other things.
That's the MO of the supermajority here the last several years. As you look at their policies, especially their economic policies, their education policies, their healthcare policies, unpopular across the board. If you ask Hoosiers to take the Pepsi challenge, right, the blind taste test,
yes.
Do you support this bill, this policy? You will find the progressive option is what people support across the board, but they use this stuff to rile up the culture war, to appeal to the Christian nationalists, to appeal to folk who maybe not even consider themselves Christian nationalists, who just good church-going Christians who think it seems like a reasonable thing to have the 10 Commandments posted in the classroom without considering the First Amendment implications of such. And so, yeah, they focus on these hot button issues and not the things on which largely Hoosiers are united, right?
Yes. Yes. And actually, it's so funny you say that, because I was just thinking this morning as I was driving in the car, like, man, what we really need is like, hey, here's this issue. How do you feel about it? And you check it and it says, okay, here's your legislator, or like, oh, here's your party. Like, I think sometimes people feel like they see the D or the R and that's how they've always voted and how their family's always voted. And so that's what's got to be. But if you look at the actual issues, the favorability is not really for the supermajority, but the state would have you think it's inevitable that that's how things are just going to go anyway. And that's why we have low voter turnout and things like that. But it's exactly bills like this that make people feel like either, the cultural war of it all, but also like, what are they doing? Like this, like for the people who don't engage in the culture war, it's such a clear waste of time that it really, makes people feel like they can't trust the system at all.
It really does. And that serves the larger right-wing agenda of government is a problem, right? Government is not the solution. You can't trust the system. You should just let private interests and the wealth class take care of everything.
Right.
Now, this bill, this 10 Commandments bill in the classrooms, sort of goes hand in hand with Governor Braun and Attorney General Todd Rokita's push to have this 10 Commandments monument displayed on the Statehouse ground as well, right?
Yeah. It's really just, generally ironic, right? Because the founding of this country, which is what they love to talk about, of freedom of religion, they forget it also means freedom from religion. And it's about agency and it's about choice. And those are the things that theoretically should be the bedrock of, our policies and, making the policies so that people actually have choices. And this absolutely takes that away.
And this monument thing at the Statehouse, it's been sitting in storage for like 20 years. They've tried this before.
They've tried it.
The courts shot it down. They said this is a plain violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to the Constitution. But the stacked, packed, stolen U.S. Supreme Court a couple years ago issued a ruling in this. It was a case about like a high school football coach who sort of coerced his players into praying with him after the game at the 50-yard line. And the Christian nationalist supermajority on the Supreme Court said, well, that's fine. He can do that. And they established this precedent now where it is allowable to have a certain amount more religion injected into the public square, into public schools, into government.
And I think they'll say like, well, you don't have to participate. Right? Like you don't have to, like he could have football players who opted out of that, theoretically. But when you look at the impact, especially if you're talking about a child, if you're talking about displaying the 10 Commandments in a second grade classroom, and even talking about, another bill talks about, civics engagement and introducing those religious concepts as part of curriculum. That is
it's religious coercion. Yeah,
correct. And you don't want to be the only second grader who's not doing what the other kids are doing. Like it's you're putting this onus of responsibility on people whose brains aren't even kind of developed, right? Like our brains are so their brains are so not ready to have to make that choice, and it's a really unethical thing to do, quite frankly.
And I find it ironic. These are the same folks who, for years, they try to introduce these bans to we don't want Sharia law in our country, which is religious law from a Islamic perspective. And I'm like, to me, this looks like Christian Sharia law.
Yep. Again, it's trying to codify it.
And,
but it goes against the Constitution, especially the founders' intent in that Constitution.
You would find that today's Christian nationalists, if they were to engage in debate with the founding fathers, if you could bring those guys here to the present to have that discussion with them, they would not be pleased. Like a lot of these
they would be called as radical leftist maniacs. That's what they would be called.
They were Unitarians and deists and not evangelical Christians by any stretch. Certainly, there were some,
sure.
But by and large, they were very clear with what they were doing with the First Amendment, and all of these, quote unquote, First Amendment absolutists on the right, they love to use the Constitution and the First Amendment to excuse hate speech, basically, to excuse incitement to violence. But they forget about the other part of the First Amendment, which is very clear about establishing a wall of separation between churches.
Yes. Agreed.
and yet, you have
here we are.
In addition to Davis's bill about the 10 Commandments in classrooms, and I want to show Michael Potter in the chat reminds us that Michelle Davis is looking for a promotion this fall. She's running for state senate down in District 41. That's Greg Walker's seat. He said he wasn't going to run, changed his mind. He's going to run for re-election this year, so they can fight that out in the primary. Democrat Ross Thomas, friend of the pod, should be noted, is running for that seat on the other side of the aisle. So Ross there could use your support. Now, Davis's colleague across the hallway in the Senate there, Stacey Donato, also introduced a bill to insert Christianity into public schools. This one permitting religious chaplains to work as volunteers in public schools and to offer secular or, with parental permission, religious guidance and support. Again, this seems to run afoul of the First Amendment. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but
neither am I.
Tell me.
Yes, no, I'm not either. But from everything that I know, yes, you are correct. And I think what they'll try to tell you is that it's fiscally responsible because these people are then volunteering their time. We don't have to pay school counselors, but then you're also not paying for someone who is qualified, trained, a mandatory reporter. I mean, and are potentially, based on a lot of what we have seen, especially recently, introducing nefarious people into your child's school. Theoretically, these are not people we should have to be afraid of, but I would rather have someone whose licensure is at stake if they don't act right. What would be the recourse here if something were to happen, or if they didn't do the job right? Because of course they're not going to do the job right, because they're not trained to do that job.
The religious far right, this was a line of attack over the last couple years. They call folks on the left groomers, right? Because God forbid we accept the basic humanity of queer folks and maybe tell kids, hey, it's okay for other people to be that way, right? You don't make fun of them, you don't persecute them, you let everybody live their truth. That
it's about
apparently
choice.
grooming.
People get to choose.
But if you look at where child abuse is happening, it's the churches. Look at the long line of abuse scandals in the Catholic Church. Look at the abuse scandals at the Southern Baptist Convention. Look at Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith's own church and his best friend and podcast partner and his questionable behavior and his son's arrest for possessing child sexual abuse material. Like, where is the grooming happening, really?
Correct. Yes. And, it's like every time something comes out about, a religious institution, it's like, yeah, every time we hear about some child abuse and here's who the perpetrator was, more often than not, it's coming from a religious institution. And again, that accountability piece is not there. I never want a child to go through that, of course, right? But the separation of church and state means that the church is going to be accountable differently than the state would be. And I would like the highest degree of accountability in my child's school. I don't know about anyone else, but I think that this is, again, they're gonna say it's fiscally responsible at the very least, and I would say it's morally irresponsible and ethically reprehensible.
I mean, we could have a qualified, trained, certified school counselor who's gone through the process, probably has a master's degree and is like horribly underpaid for the amount of education they have.
Horribly, yes.
Or we could have some guy who's ordained from God knows where. I mean, you can go on the internet and get ordained now, right? And say you're a member of a religious institution, but he's free.
Which is interesting. That's a really good point that you make, because for a long time, like if you think about, not that this is even the discussion we're having really, but if you think about sort of the talking points that we've heard about bathrooms, and that anyone could just dress up as however they want and go hurt someone in a bathroom. Right. This is the same thing. So if that's your argument there, you cannot introduce anyone into the school to get into my child's school, I have to have a level 3 background check as a parent.
Yeah.
To go into my child's school. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, if you want to go in and read, if you want to go on a field trip with the kids.
Yes.
But you get a piece of paper from some religious organization, and apparently you are qualified to offer guidance to school children.
Anyone guidance, if you want to get that after, great, go to your church after school, seek the guidance that you want to get from that person. It has no place in school whatsoever. There's no need for it.
Right. You can exercise your freedom of religion outside of school hours.
Outside of school. Yep.
So staying on the Senate side, there is one from Gary Byrne, and boy, that's a long boy up there on the screen. But this is a broad bill. It's one of these various education matters bill.
I hate those ones, man.
Means to me, number one, can we talk about how a bill should just discuss one thing? But whenever they have these various education matters bills, it reads like a grab bag of culture war garbage.
Well, and they're just they're hoping that they'll be able to sneak things through and that they'll be able to distract you with things like this, so you won't see the other damage that's being done in the legislation as it is written.
So, what's in the grab bag here in Senate Bill 88 from Senator Byrne?
I've been dealing with the House side of things, so I'm not as well versed in this bill as I am in some of the other ones. But it's really interesting. This bill, introduces the 10 Commandments as part of a civics curriculum. And but it also wants to eliminate discussions on topics like racism, sexism, and class conflict, which I don't know if you've read the Bible, but I have, and it is rife with racism, sexism, and class conflict. So which one do you want? You want to talk about the reality of things, or do we not?
I mean, listen, I am not a Christian. I am not super well versed in the Bible. I did minor in religious studies in college, but I do know this: you cannot read the words of Jesus of Nazareth without talking about class conflict. I mean, this is the guy who talked about rich men not being able to pass, or it being harder for rich men to get into heaven than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle.
Yeah,
that sounds like class war to me.
Yep. I would agree. And the Bible, quite frankly, contradicts itself, right? It talks about slavery in the Bible, and it okays it. It talks about women as property in the Bible. It talks about different things that are then in the New Testament. We you know what I mean? There's a new law. And so things like racism and sexism and class conflict that are realities in our world, oftentimes perpetrated by, religion and people who claim to follow the 10 Commandments, as far as they understand them. I would argue that those things are not in conflict with our country's shared principles, because it's within the text of the Bible itself that the 10 Commandments come from.
And then along the lines in this bill where it said, you can't talk about racism or sexism or class conflict. I don't know how you talk about American history honestly without talking about these things. And I assume that's the point, is to not talk about American history honestly.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting. Yeah. It says, requires universities to accept the classic learning test, which classic to who? Right? Classic according to who? What does classic mean? What does traditional mean? According to whose traditions? So it is Christian nationalism again, just legislated.
And it's ostrich head in the sand stuff to look at American history and just say, we've always been perfect. America's always been great. We've never made mistakes. We've never done things that we should regret. They say that we can't talk about the history of slavery in this country because it would make white kids feel bad. It would make them feel guilty. I don't know. I think it's okay to look at the past and say, man, we did some things differently back then. We shouldn't have done that. Maybe we can learn from our mistakes and grow.
And I will tell you, I have young white kids, and I've had that conversation with them, and they get it. It's not, you know what I mean? They're not offended by the conversation. They're offended by the fact that it happened. That's what that's what upsets them. And so if you are offended by the conversation more than you are about the fact that it happened, then that tells you where someone is. That's exposing them, from that perspective. Anyway, another thing that's interesting in this bill, just a lot of it contradicts research, right? A lot of it contradicts best practice we have here at the last line, the bottom of it. Because there's things like the importance of obtaining a high school diploma. Absolutely, that's great, right? Sure. Acquiring additional workforce training, that's fantastic too. But also waiting until marriage to begin having children. Whether or not you feel like that morally one way or another, the research doesn't back it up, right? Abstinence-only education is not effective at preventing teen pregnancies. And then you have kids who live in a state that don't have any sort of protection if they were to get pregnant. Right. And
Right.
so again, so like there's these sort of sneaky ways that they take these bigger issues and they say, nope, you got to have the 10 Commandments and also no sex education, or the sex education is abstinence only. Right. So it's in a lot of ways not backed by best practice or research that we have, regardless of how you feel about the concept. Again, you can have that conversation in your family about how you feel about sex before marriage, right? Or waiting until marriage to begin having children is how they say it. They don't even say the word sex before marriage, right?
Yeah.
They're not even willing to talk about it. But if you look at other countries who do it better, they have far less children before marriage.
The irony, right? And
it's really frustrating.
In the end, it comes down to it's science, right? It's research. It's, hey, if you look at the data, teaching real sex ed, science-based sex ed has better outcomes, but these folks don't really care about the outcomes. They care about control, is what it seems like to me.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Again, like all of these, you'll see sort of how one bill or one issue will get legislated in one chamber and another in a different piece of legislation, whether in that chamber or the other one. But there's these pieces that you start connecting as you're having these conversations about things like, sex education or waiting until marriage to begin having children, and sort of the ideology behind that and the theory behind that. But okay, so then what happens then if you have a chaplain in a school and there's a teenage pregnancy? Then what? Right? That becomes a dangerous situation for that teenager. Because is the chaplain required to keep something confidential? Right? Like we don't know. To me, that becomes, so when you see how these bills could work together, it can get kind of really scary really quickly.
Yeah, it really can. And man, we could pick that apart all day too, I feel like.
Yeah.
But I want to turn from, I guess, the Christian nationalist portion of our show,
of our legislative,
over to the privatization portion of the show. And again, like we said at the beginning, these things are related. They are intertwined.
Of course.
But if we go back over to the House, Jake Teshka, representative there, has introduced Bill 1176, which makes it easier to convert public schools into charter schools. Now, can you talk briefly about why charter schools are problematic?
Yes, I can. And I was actually able to testify on this bill in front of Representative Teshka the other day. It was a fun little discussion that we had. But in terms of, charter schools and how they are hurting public education, is the mechanism by which they are funded. And it's particularly nefarious in Indiana. I have family members in other states who have had children go through, different various iterations of schooling frameworks. And how the tax dollars are used are different in other states. And how Indiana is proposing these tax dollars be used is for all, and again, this is even like last year, the SEA 1 got passed, which, gutted property taxes. So schools already don't know how they're going to get funded, but it also made it so that any property tax revenue that we are going to get has to be shared with charter schools, which are not required to show the same levels of accountability as public schools are. And they will tell you, and this is what they kept saying, and when I was, testifying, is there's like, well, charter schools are public schools. In Indiana, they do not operate that way whatsoever. Charter schools are private schools here. They just operate through public funding. And now our private schools also get public funding. And so we are taking away, if we fully funded public education, none of these issues that they are citing as reasons to leave a public school would be an issue. But when you systematically defund public schools and then say, see, they're not working, my favorite phrase is public education isn't failing, it's starving. And I have seen that time and time again, and that's exactly what this is happening. And when public schools are saying, hey, we are hungry, and they say, cool, I'm going to take another loaf of bread. That's what's happening here. And so they're making them share transportation, share buildings, share administrators, but they have none of the accountability or the burden to educate all students, even though they're supposed to. But they can say, oh, we don't have the staff. Sorry, we can't do that. Or they can require you to sign away your rights to an IEP.
Yeah. And they there's been cases in the state. I mean, like massive charter school fraud. Multiple cases have been prosecuted. And
that's across the country.
A lot of our state legislators are sponsored and supported and get massive campaign contributions from the charter school lobby.
Yes.
And
including Representative Teshka, who introduced this bill.
Oh, shocking! It's very much along the lines of, if you remember Ronald Reagan saying, government's not the problem or not the solution, it's the problem, right? And they're gutting any public institution because they're like opposed to the public good. They're opposed to holding things in common. They say that it is communism to have public goods, basically, to have public education. And what they do, they destroy it by defunding it. They're arsonists, and they come in and say, we're here to put out the fire. And then, in the cartoons where the clown comes in with the big bucket, like they're going to put out the fire with water and it's confetti. That's what these guys are doing. They're putting out the fire with confetti.
And they started the fire.
Yes.
To begin with. Like you said, the arsons of it all. Yes, it's it's really, really frustrating. And if you think about like other, things that have been privatized in our country and how those are going, like look at prisons. Is that what we want to have happen in public education? Yeah. I don't. So this bill in particular is really interesting because Representative Teshka last year authored a bill that did not pass. And this is basically the same thing. It's just repackaged. And so it does the same exact thing. But which is the goal of it is to.
I guess it's the same thing. Do we think it's probably going to get stuck similarly? I mean, we're basically dealing with the same cast of characters here in the legislature.
We very much are. Yes. The concern is with any of these things, any of the Senate bills that we've talked about, these House bills that we're about to talk about, is sort of they count on exhaustion and they count on normalization. That if they say something long enough and loud enough, you'll feel like you're the crazy one for feeling like that's not a good idea, right? Mm-hmm. And my concern with this bill especially is that's exactly what's happening. And it also connects very closely with the IPS issues that are happening right now. And
Can we talk about that a little bit? Yeah.
Sure. So this bill in particular, or the IPS stuff?
The IPS, we've been covering it over on Who's Left, the ILEA, the Indianapolis Local Education Association, which is this group it was mandated by the state in last year's legislature, right? They basically told the city and told IPS to figure out your public school situation. Figure out how to make charters and private schools and IPS work better together. And wouldn't you know, they passed last year, at the end of last month, recommendations that basically give the mayor oversight over all of the schools and neuter the democratically elected IPS school board. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
that is fair. And you'll have people who will be like, no, 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 they're still keeping the school board. But the power that the school board will have will be so diminished that it will be ineffectual. And they'll say things like, well, I think the school board still gets to do curriculum. And you're like, but they don't have the dollars. They don't get to, like, whoever holds the purse strings has the power. And I can bet you pretty quickly that they will not have the power over the curriculum. And then they literally will have nothing. And so it will be in name only. And that's to say nothing of the fact that what we see happening across the state is that you have board members who are elected who don't believe in public education. And they are put there, and their campaigns are also funded, and they're put in there systematically also to be a part of the defunding and the destabilization of education.
Hired arsonists, right?
Correct. And so, and sometimes they don't even know, right? Sometimes they're not even in on it. They don't even know they're the puppet. And other times they do, right? And that's depending on the person. The people who are fueling the fire don't care either way.
And a lot of that, like in Indianapolis, this situation, this is people who are nominally Democrats. This is Joe Hogsett. This is certain members of the city county council, including the new president of the city county council.
But they're still being paid for, and their campaigns are being heavily funded by pro-voucher and pro-charter groups.
So this is to say, number one, a good place to reemphasize that MADVoters is a nonpartisan group. Correct. And criticizes Democrats and Republicans alike. Correct. When they engage in bad policy. And just because you have a D next to your name doesn't mean you're one of the good guys.
You have to still look at what they're doing, right? Bart Peterson was the mayor in 2000, is when he became the mayor of Indianapolis, right? Mm-hmm. And enrollment was collapsing and test scores were down because it wasn't funded, and because public schools still have to educate all kids, and they bear the burden of that, especially when it doesn't go well at the private or charter school, whatever we're calling it, and the kid gets sent back to public schools, and then they have to make up for the losses happening at the charter schools, right? And it was interesting the other day when I was there testifying that they say, the dollars follow the kid. But that's only up until a certain point. If the kid switches after October 1st, the dollars do not follow them back to the public school.
And we've seen cases of chicanery
shutting down mid-year.
The count day. Yeah.
Yes. And if a charter school can't hack it and they shut down mid-year, then what? They take the money and run. There's no accountability. I would like to see legislated at the very least, if you are either a nonprofit or profit charter school, that you are revenue sharing back to the taxpayers, back to the school district. Why isn't that in any legislation?
Yeah, and it's concerning. There's a very powerful nonprofit organization, a charter organization there in Indianapolis called the Mind Trust, who are very, very much engaged in this. And look at the very nice, well-paid, well compensated to push this agenda, and
they partnered with Bart
wonder
Peterson.
If they're really in it for the kids.
Yes, they partnered with Bart Peterson when he was the mayor, and they convinced state legislators that Indianapolis mayor should have unprecedented power, right? The ability to authorize charter schools directly, bypassing elected school boards entirely. And no other mayor in Indiana had ever had this authority. And it was a carve out, just like other things in Indianapolis's past, it was special rules for Indianapolis made by legislators who created the problem in the first place. And so while Bart Peterson was in, he authorized 17 charter schools before he left office. And then Greg Ballard authorized more. And then Joe Hogsett became mayor. And he's exactly what the Mind Trust promised, right? Which would be that he would lead the charter capital of America. And if you look, like you said, around, the country, I'm sure you've heard of Arizona. They're probably the largest case study in our country about charter schools. And they thought their charter program would cost $60 million, and it's $322 million and counting.
Yeah, I believe they were the first state to go universal, quote unquote, school choice, which Indiana now has, and they are running into problems and having to put band-aids on the solution when
the fraud, waste, and abuse of it all.
When public school advocates were telling them the whole time this was going to happen.
It's infuriating as an advocate, because, and this is why, having Mad Voters is so nice, is because you have an avenue to do something about it. But, it feels often, I would call my legislators over and over and over and ask to talk to them. I'm a policy expert in this. Come talk to me. I'll meet you for coffee. Please just engage with someone who actually knows what they're talking about. And it's crickets. And you're screaming into this void. And then when there's a negative outcome, they act surprised. And you're like, we tried to tell you. And so it's extremely frustrating, and why organizations where we can coalesce around grassroots issues, it's really nice to actually have something to do about it and to amplify.
It's not very issues, gratifying. I told you so, though, because the outcome.
But you don't want to have to say that I told you so, right? Like, I don't want to have to say that. I would rather it not be an issue. But it becomes like education becomes a shell game. And that's not what our kids deserve.
So, we talked about the shortcomings of Indianapolis Democrats and how they're not necessarily on the right side of history here. There is one Indianapolis Democrat who is, and that's State Senator Fatty Cadora, who introduced Senate Bill 86, which is intended to increase oversight on these charter schools. Now, great idea, good bill. Love Fatty, love Senator Cadora, good guy, but this thing's dead on arrival, right?
I would love for it to get passed. I'll say that. I would love to see this passed. What the legislators on the right will tell you is that Indianapolis and Indiana charter schools already have far more accountability than any other state in the nation. They are more accountable than public schools. That's what they will tell you. And I would like to say, in what world and to who? Exactly. Definitely not to the taxpayer. Definitely not to the school board. Right? And some of the things that she is asking for in this bill, which would be fantastic, are things like requires charters to provide transportation for all students living within the school district. Yeah, that is something that they should do. That's what a public school has to do. And in other states, the parents are required to be, if you choose to have your student leave public school, you're choosing to drive them there. That's part of the deal, right? That's part of what you're getting into. And this is trying to, our legislators are actively in other legislation trying to get rid of that. In-person budget meetings, that's like local accountability. All of these things that we would love to see are being introduced in this bill. I would love to see it pass.
As would I. So last bill I want to talk about here today, something we would not like to see pass from perhaps one of the real heels in the Indiana state legislature, a place where there are many, but State Representative Andrew Ireland's House Bill 1313 would prevent schools from moving to virtual days to accommodate protests or advocacy, and it also bans payroll, dues, deductions. And this whole thing looks like a broadside attack on the public teachers unions.
Correct. That's exactly what it is. Yes, and it's really disheartening because I'm sure teachers, I know teachers, they are doing more and more with less and less, and they kill themselves to teach these kids and to do everything that they can for them. And as you weaken, teachers' unions, the bargaining power of teachers, that is further destabilization of public education. It's not even just about, the rights that they would have as a union member. It's about further destabilizing the system of public education.
And unions in general. Republicans are just anti-union. They're anti-solidarity. They want to...
They're anti-worker.
Yeah. And well, again, that's a whole other can of worms. We could get into why certain trades unions have been supporting Republicans more and more lately, and the way the attack on teachers unions broadly fits into a pattern of attack on public sector unions in general over the years. If you go back to the big thing in Wisconsin, probably 10, 15 years ago now, and it's again long pattern. The right has always been anti-union. They keep the attacks up. So, Devon, I guess we got a couple minutes here. Let's take that time to make sure folks know where to go for more information on these bills as they make their way through the legislature, or hopefully, in many of their cases, die a fast death in committee.
Yes. You can always find us on MADVoters is on social media, and that's a lot of times like really up to date, sort of like, hey, this is happening right now. Call your legislators right now. Kind of information can come out. So I would definitely, of course, follow MADVoters on Facebook and Instagram. But our bill tracker is invaluable, and we have, like I said, it's grassroots, and so there's people who are experts in their various domains. The education people follow the education bills, and it's really nice to be able to sort of crowdsource people's expertise. And so this is our bill tracker we talk about it every day while session is happening, and sort of try to understand the legislation, which is intentionally confusing sometimes, and it allows you to sort of look at least how MADVoters is feeling about a piece of legislation. And sometimes we look at legislation and we say, oh, we don't know yet. Do we know? Does anyone have any insight on this? And sometimes
you're upfront about that on the bill tracker as well. There are, there's thumbs ups, there's thumbs downs, and then there's like a little clipboard
and we'll thumbs up
that says we need more information.
Yes, we need more information. Or you'll see, we will thumbs up, even though we're a progressive organization, we thumbs up bills by Republicans. And we'll thumbs down a bill by a Democrat, right? Like, it's really about the public good. And that's what this helps us do, is to sort of demystify the legislative process and hopefully make it as tangible to people as possible.
And so, again, that is at madvoters.org, the bill tracker, updated daily, basically, during session here.
It's all hands on deck. Yep.
Yeah, balls to the wall here for the next 10 weeks or so, and we will be here in this space talking about the progress of these bills and others throughout session. MADVoters will be here with us on Progressive Indiana Network talking about the progress every week, as long as the legislature is in session. Next week, we will be here on Sunday at 1:30. So that's about an hour after I get done with Who's Left This Week. We'll be back on the same channels talking about really the first real week of movement of these bills through the session. And we'll widen our scope beyond just the education bills. We'll look at healthcare. We'll look at public safety. We'll look at immigration. We'll look at the social safety net. There is a lot going on. It's not a super packed session in terms of how these things go. Like we said, again, it's a short one this year. Last year was the budget session with the property tax bill and everything.
But it's important to pay attention. Because it's moving so fast. The risk is that legislation will get pushed through that shouldn't be pushed through.
And another, it's not just the straight information at MADVoters. You guys also have call to action. You make it very easy to identify who your state representative,
or state
senator is, and
what to even say if you don't know. Yep. There's scripts available. We try to really, like I said, demystify and just make the process as simple as possible for the everyday voter.
So just invaluable information.
It's amazing work.
I cannot thank you guys at MADVoters enough for doing what you do. And I'm incredibly grateful to you, and thankful that we get a chance to help broadcast your message and to talk about the things that are important to Hoosiers here.
Yeah, well, thank you for allowing us to come in and talk about, like these important bills. They really do affect all of us. And so even if a bill looks like it's just for Indianapolis, it's not. Like, we've got to all be paying attention and lending our voice to it. So thank you for letting us do that.
That's true. Anytime. Well, thank you, Devon Wellington from MADVoters, for being here today. We will be back next week with another update from the Statehouse. Until then, I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.